Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Michelle Hammons. She is a certified high performance coach with a multidisciplinary background as an artist, serial entrepreneur, and corporate leader. Welcome to the show, Michelle.
AJ, hello. Great to be here.
You are welcome to the show, Michelle. You are welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk about. We'll be talking about how one can lead from their creative edge. So, Michelle, first to understand about this, creative edge. In your case, let's look at it. You are a high performance coach, but you have been an artist, serial entrepreneur, corporate leader. How did you manage these things, and how people can manage these things? Their artistic side, as well as the creative side, as well as their leadership side. Help us understand how did you do it in your life, so that we understand it through a bit through your own journey.
Sure. So, creativity, I believe, resides within all of us. And how that came about for me is throughout my whole life, I've done different kinds of creative endeavors. Sometimes that showed up as performance things, like when I was in school, like music, talent, singing, those kind of things. I always say we go to the paintbrushes and the performing arts, because that's what a lot of people think about creative edge. But it's so much more than that. It's creative thinking, it's creative process, and it's where so many threads get tied that we don't always relate to creative edge. And so, for example, as I was in my corporate career, you mentioned that a moment ago, I was in information technology. Well, software developers and people who create systems and software, it's very creative work. They're in there literally writing code to create magic things that we all love and enjoy in our modern life. So there's a lot of threads to this. I spent in one of my entrepreneurial businesses, I was a professional photographer for 15 years. So I created art. I created portraits of weddings and family portraits and high school seniors and others. But I was working with people's image, right? And to really draw out their beauty, their outer beauty, to make them look their best and feel their best. And so all of these elements, while they're very different, are all creative uh, contributions, right, that we make through our work and our lives. And I believe we all have this. Sometimes we haven't unpacked it yet.
Right, right. So people nowadays do use, their creative side of things. Some people, leaders, you will see that some of these leaders, they play guitar, they do other things, artistic work. A lot of common people, when they say follow your passion, today there is this whole concept about, following your passion, do what you feel good about, and that is where. So people leave one job or the other and get into a creative field. So when I understand, leading from your creative edge, what do you mean by that? Is it the same thing? Is it something different than what people are doing? Or you want people to do it at a much, much wider scale? Help us understand this creative edge stuff.
Yes, so it's a great question. Thank you for asking, because leadership, when we think about the different styles and types and kinds of leaders that make up our world, right? That we there's lots of different flavors. There's lots of different styles that we can associate with leadership. The creative edge that comes in with leadership says, I'm going to do it in a way that it brings out the best in me, right? It brings my natural skills, talents, abilities, maybe strengths is sometimes what we might bring forward when we think about leadership. It's not we don't think about leadership with the creative language unless you are an artist. But in leadership, it's all about creativity. You're dealing with other humans, you're dealing with solving problems, and problem solving is an element of creative edge. And so I think sometimes it's a little bit misunderstood. So you can lead from that place of authenticity and who you are as a leader, and that reflects your true image, the trueness of who you are, your authentic self. But then I also think you can challenge others. And in a collaborative environment as a leader, when you're working with teams or other leaders, then if everyone shows up that way, these amazing ideas surface, right? The ideas get more powerful, the vision gets clearer. And so that's how I think it's reflected from a leadership perspective.
Right, Michelle. So let's look at the leadership itself. When we talk about authentic self and leadership, a lot of leaders, when they try and look within, many find are suffering from imposter syndrome. So that comes out in this way. Secondly, a lot of leaders who again think that their job is to lead from the front has led to the great resignation and quiet quitting. So I want to understand that how can they find their authentic self? What is their authentic self when much more probing, much more internal journey leads to this sort of things? Are they doing it wrong? Are they doing it in a way that they should not do? Help me understand that, so that also, is leadership about only those people who are actually holding designations? How can a normal person still lead from a creative edge, and find their creative strengths within themselves, and lead life from that point of view?
Yeah, I love these questions that you're bringing up because it's so important. So, one, in today's climate of leadership, it's gotten more complex. We have bigger issues to deal with. Coming out of COVID, leaders had new things that they had to start working and concerning themselves with. Right? How are we going to work remotely? How are we going to come back to the office? Are we going to come back to the office? How are we going to have teamwork when everyone's dispersed? Right? There's all these different kinds of leadership issues that show up that we haven't always had to deal with. We had more authoritative ways that said you're going to come to the office, right? Some industries like IT, that's always been one that's a little more flexible, at least in my world. For years, that's been common. But in many industries, it was not common. And so leaders are, so they're challenged, right, in new ways to show up. The word leadership, I love that you highlighted that because leadership is not about having a formal title. Leadership is about being able to have influence and persuasion with others to bring them along in a journey to help them discover how they can contribute in a powerful way. And when you're working with teams as the leader, you have to motivate and inspire others, lead the pack, as we say. And so it's really an important distinction that the difference between being like a manager with a title versus a leader, there's huge differences. They can be formal or informal. When we think of great leaders in history, like I think of, there's so many great models that we could look at, right, all through history, big leaders, world leaders, that they influence through their quiet leadership, right? And so it comes in all shapes and sizes. I think of it like going to the ice cream store. There's all these different flavors and they're all good. And when they all come together, we can have these higher performing, higher collaborating teams because having the same kind of leadership, I'll say the old school style, where we were all going to do the same thing and we were going to all follow a same cookie cutter path, that's just not the world we live in today. We have all this diversity. We have all the diversity of the jobs. We do work with more technology. Back when we just had manufacturing where you had to go to the factory or go somewhere to do the job, it was very different culture at that time. Now we have all this great stuff that allows us to have more time freedom to work in ways that we never could before, and also more efficiently through like this Zoom call. Like I would have never met you in a past life across the world without the technology of Zoom and or the way we're doing this here. It's not on Zoom, but it's on StreamYard. So it's such a fascinating medium because you can connect more ideas and more people together this way. More globally, leaders can come together and collaborate. The other thing you said is this quiet quitting and what's led to like the great resignation. During COVID, my observation as a coach was that we always had high performers who saw the value in coaching. And by the way, most of the world, like 85-90% of the world as an adult have never worked with a coach. So they may not have had this experience. When COVID hit, high performing people said, I need to really amp this up right now. This is a place we're uncertain. We don't have direction. There might be some things, and we'll touch on imposter syndrome about this too. But what that looks like is the leaders had to adapt, right? They had to start doing things differently. And so during COVID, the rest of the world kind of woke up to their life and they said, maybe I don't like my job. Maybe I want to move to another place and another culture. Maybe I want to change it up, right? I don't have it forced us to do things in a different way, which also forced the possibility of new things that we could do in different ways. So I think that's part of that answer from the leadership side as the quiet quitting and the great resignation. I think where people maybe were just kind of going through the motions, maybe kind of in the comfort zone, that they kind of woke up to their life and went, I think I might want something different. And so coaching helped facilitate a lot of change. And also I think it's really been a growth industry right now because of the changes coming out of that.
Right, right, Michelle. Let's look at it from the leader's point of view. Let me understand for the audience, what do many of your clients come to you for? What are their general questions? Secondly, one thing I'm quite finding it ironical, Michelle, is that in today's time we talk always of leaders of the past, but designations are held by the people today.
Mhm.
And I don't find them telling about, that these are great leaders who will, of today, who will pass down in history as great leaders.
Yeah.
Hardly have any. So you invoke leaders' name from 200 years back. How do you see that? How can we not have examples from today's time, either in terms of political leadership, either in terms of corporate leadership, or any other sort of leaders? Is it because, you know, I think it's all collective lying then. So, how do you look at this part of the thing? Second is, that you talked about Zoom call, about StreamYard. We are able to connect, we are talking freely. Leaders have their people around them in the office, they are not able to connect. Why is it so? Is it the lack of leadership? Is it their lack of authenticity? Or is it, when they are in very good times, they will talk about them, me, and all the money will go to me, my stock options. But when there is a bad time, then they will tell, we have to do this together.
Mhm.
You be a part of my failure, and then there will be layoffs. So I want to understand in this backdrop the type of problems these people come to you for, and how do you solve these problems when they themselves can be the problem. Help us understand this.
Yeah. So I always like to give this example. Like when we have kids, we often want our kids to do better, right? So we'll hire a soccer coach or a gymnastics coach, or we'll get them the support, the tutoring, the mentorship that they need. As we move into adulting, we don't really always think of it. Like we could have that same support as an adult that we would freely and be excited to give our kids, but we might miss that as an adult. It's just not a common thing. Like I said, most people haven't actually worked with a coach, so they don't know what the process looks like. So then you ask this deeper question, and it's such an important one because when we think about what people come to and need help for, it's like look at your fingerprints. Everyone's different. We may have the same family structure, but we may live in different cultures. We may have different belief systems. We may have, so really no two people are alike. That's why we're distinguished differently by our fingerprints. And so when we think about trying to, it's not a one size fits all. What I work in is a structure that is consistent in the structure that delivers those outcome driven results. But the person is, you could not compare one person to another to another to another because they all have different visions, they all have different dreams. One person wants to what life and good looks like is completely different to someone else. Some people want to travel the world, for example. Some people want to live in a mansion on the beach. Some people want to give and serve and have no home and travel the world. It's serving on behalf of others. So everyone has a different vision when we think about why people come, and they're trying to figure out. So how they arrive at this question of do I need support is usually because they're feeling bored, they're feeling restless, they're feeling like there's something more. Maybe they're ready to unpack something big at another level and they need some help getting the clarity around that. And so it's not it I always like to frame that it's not because something's necessarily going terribly wrong. It might actually be because they want more aspiration. And so it's really important when we think about this particular work that everything can be going really well And it's just like you wouldn't look at an Olympic athlete or someone at the top of their field from a performance perspective. They have coaches around them supporting them. What makes them the champion is those nano differences in their performance, in the insight that someone watching and observing and having conversation with them. When we see this all the time in athletics, right? Is the field that, or maybe performance racing is another area. It's those nanosecond differences. So those are some of the observations I would make. The imposter syndrome that you mentioned early is also worth commenting on. We all experience some imposter syndrome, and uncertainty should evoke that a little bit, right? Like if we're doing something we haven't done before, we haven't figured out all the details yet, we're going to feel a little outside our comfort zone, which is what imposter syndrome is. So if you're just feeling like everything's good and maybe there's nothing to fear, that's a sign you're stuck in the comfort zone.
Right, right, Michelle. Well explained. Now let's understand this whole concept of imposter syndrome of anything. Leaders are actually making those progress in leaps and bounds. So you are not getting the feel of the ground,
Mhm.
and that is why perhaps you need to understand yourself or your people better. For example, if we are talking, we can see each other well, we can hear each other well, but when you meet someone, it is a very different thing altogether. You can meet all your loved ones across Zoom, WhatsApp, or anything, but the feeling of meeting, the same is about leadership. When you only think about achievement in terms of about yourself, and feelings about only your security needs, you never reach to that self actualization, maybe you do when you reach 80, then it's a waste of time. That is the thing people need to understand it perhaps better in today's time. What do you say? Is it about choices that some of these leaders make, and so you are what you choose? And also it's about the mindset. Help us understand that, is leadership or is the creative edge dependent on your choices or actually your mindset? Help us understand vis-a-vis both of them.
Yes, and this relates to your question also about communication. So it it's both, right? So we have self-serving leaders, right? That they show up and they want things for themselves, the benefits that they reap. And like you said, in good times, they're thinking about what's in it for me. Maybe in bad times, they're thinking, how are we all going to survive, right? We see this in corporate around layoffs. You mentioned that. And I've been through lots of corporate layoffs. And I've never experienced that myself, but I've definitely seen lots of people who have, and they often, it comes as a shock, it comes as a surprise. They thought things were going well, and it really is sometimes about courageous leadership, because sometimes it doesn't get communicated, and so then these wholesale changes start to get made, like in a layoff where decisions have to be made from a financial perspective to keep a company thriving, and the people that they weren't maybe courageously communicating with might be the first to be exited from the organization. And no news to somebody is says I'm doing okay. So if you don't have that active communication between the leader and the team members that they support, then most people are going to assume that I'm doing well, I'm doing acceptable, I'm doing okay, unless someone's willing to really have those more courageous conversations. And they're harder, right? To sit with someone and talk about performance issues or how they might improve. Those take more effort, more time, more energy. And so there is this communication piece that you're talking about. Like, are we really communicating? Like you and I are having this great conversation, and this is our first encounter, right? So when we think about people that work together 40, 50, 60 hours a week, or maybe decades with each other, they probably aren't having the same kind of rapport you and I are, because the intentionality is not there and the mindset is not there, right? You just hit on it. At the humanity level, those of us who have a higher level of thinking about mindset, we're concerned about ourselves and self-care. We're concerned about others. We want to build relationships so we can have these greater connections. And so mindset plays a huge role in it. And often I think there's so many meetings that get scheduled, or at least when I was in those environments, the meetings just don't have a lot of meaning, right? There's kind of work getting done, but it gets drug out and drug on, and a lot of meetings. So I think it takes away from the ability to really have that authentic communication when we're just meeting to meet, or meeting because there's an agenda, or because it feels good, because it feels like progress, when nothing's really truly happening. And some meetings can be effective, so they're good in some ways, but I think those are some of my observations.
Absolutely, absolutely. So meeting should be all solutions centric. Otherwise, it's all a waste of time. And people love to do, many of these people who are, who are in the organization. It's a fact. Many people just want to waste their time. They just want to complete their work for the day in terms of, on paper work. Like
Yeah.
this present time, there is this new word called badging. When organizations ask you to come to office, so you come to office, you just enter your login and everything, and then you have some coffee and go back. So your work is done, organization's work is done, but there is no actual meeting to find a solution for this hybrid sort of a work. Be that as it may, in terms of let's find solution for this ourselves, how can one still within the present, confines of our environment, still be able to find our creative edge, either as an individual, either as a leader in whatever capacity one is. How can we do that? What are the few things, if you can sum up, so that one can remember and get the best in whatever situations we are all in?
Sure. Well, I'll address it during the workday for those that might go and spend 8 hours or more at a day job or night job or whatever shift you work in these days. One is you've got to give yourself some time to step away step away and take a lunch break. So many people I talk to, they just work through their lunch hour. They also don't get up from their desk. We're sitting as a world culture more than ever in history. And these human bodies that we were created with, they are designed to move. They're designed to stand. They're designed to move around. So when we sit and just continuously sit for long durations, it drains our energy, which drains our creative edge. So to get up and move around, activate the body, get some hydration, make sure you're fueling with food and water during the day. So many people I know, they feel so stressed and so much pressure, they just skip those things, and it ultimately leads to greater energy drain and exhaustion. So I think those are some practical ways outside of work. I think it's having hobbies, having interests, engaging with people, doing things with your friends, listening to music, going for a walk, connecting with nature, whatever it is for you. Find those wellness practices, is how I like to put them in a bucket, and really make sure you should feel energized. You should feel like a sense of well-being when you're engaged in those things. Sometimes it's physical exercise, sometimes it's time with family, sometimes it's watching entertainment. It's different for everyone. So you've got to find what that is for you.
Absolutely. There is much to learn about these things. And so, a lot of people who would like to learn more from you, engage with you professionally, what is the best way for them to do so?
So the best way to reach me is through my website, and it's creativityplaybook.com. There's an email contact. It also has my phone number there. And I just invite you, if this conversation is resonating with you, to reach out. What that looks like is we just get on a call, very much like you and I are, AJ, and we just talk about what's going on with you. What is your aspiration? What do you want the vision for the future to be? And as a starting place, and we call that a discovery call. And it's important that we have that conversation, because one, it may be something else you need besides coaching, right? That I could maybe do a referral or something with. It's also a way for us to see, is this a good fit? Because working with a coach is a personal experience, and it's a relationship that gets built over time, and you got to build trust. And so you got to have rapport, and it's all relational when we think about the work that we're going to do together. So that's the best way to reach me. And I invite anyone to do that.
Right, right. If I put it that in my way, get off the Microsoft Edge. I mean, Chrome Edge, there is no Chrome Edge. So, Microsoft Edge and all other edges, and find your creative edge and find the best for yourself. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, AJ.